Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. On today's show, we're talking about how some businesses were largely left out in the cold over the last year, despite being mandated to close or drastically scale back on business to prevent the spread of the pandemic. A number of new initiatives have been brought forward since December, and again most recently in the past month. Last week, the Small Business Administration, the SBA in the U.S., revealed a much-anticipated timeline for $28.6 billion. It's a grant program for restaurants hit hard by the pandemic. This is one sector that's seen thousands of businesses close permanently. Those that remain are hanging on by a thread. I've spoken with several restaurant owners in recent weeks about how they fared during the pandemic. It didn't matter whether they were located in the U.S., Canada, or the U.K. The story's been pretty much the same. Naturally, they've laid off staff in order to survive. The biggest issue has been whether their landlords have been willing to work with the business owner or not. In cases where the landlord insisted on getting paid in full, many restaurants have been forced to close. Many of the owners I've spoken with have adapted their menu and created new menus specifically optimized for the takeout experience. But in most cases, these businesses have needed more than just a pivot to takeout business. Survival has required a combination of rent relief from landlords or government assistance or both. Those restaurants that are still left standing after the pandemic is over will, in my opinion, do a booming business. While the restaurant industry may have shrunk throughout the pandemic, there's no question in my mind that the smaller industry will be overrun with demand. The SBA in the U.S. is planning to roll out the Restaurant Revitalization Fund grant program within 30 days. That's according to an agency official last Wednesday during a congressional hearing. The grant program, authorized by Congress as part of the recently passed American Rescue Act, would allow restaurants to apply for grants up to $10 million based on lost revenue. $5 billion of the total is set aside for businesses that made up less than $500,000 in 2019. The SBA had not previously laid out a specific timeframe for the program, but senators in the committee pressed the agency repeatedly on the program's launch plans during the hearings. Those who are in the performing arts have also been stripped of their income last year. This includes musicians, actors, comedians, magicians, all of the supporting businesses that form part of the performing arts. We're talking about lighting technicians, sound technicians, the directors, the ticket agents, the ushers, and the food and drink concessions that form part of most performing arts venues. Earlier this year, the SBA announced the rollout of its Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program. It was first passed into law back in December. Performing arts businesses looking to apply to the SBA program for shuttered arts and culture venues will be able to start applying on April the 8th. That's according to guidance announced last Friday. In the meantime, businesses can sign up to receive updates on the grant program on a new website that the SBA created specifically in preparation for the launch. The SBA said potential applicants must be registered in the federal government's system for award management. That's called the SAM program in order to get a grant. I can tell you from firsthand experience that getting a SAM number is a bureaucratic process. It has a few possible stumbling spots in the application process. Be prepared that it's going to take time to get a SAM number if you don't have one. Eligible businesses include live venue operators, promoters, theatrical producers, performing arts organizations, museums, zoos, aquariums, and theaters. But even with the April 8th start date, eligible businesses will have to wait in line. The SBA has said the first 14 days of the program will only be open to venues that suffered a 90% or greater revenue loss between this past April and December as a result of COVID-19. The next 14 days will be reserved for venues that suffered a 70% revenue loss or more in that time period, and then only after the first 28 days can venues that suffered smaller losses be considered for the grants. Grants are sized by the average monthly gross revenue for each full month a company was operational, and then you multiply that by 6, and it's capped at $10 million. Funds can be used for a variety of expenses, including payroll, rent, utilities, scheduled mortgage and debt payments, personal protective equipment, contractor payments, admin costs, state and local taxes, even insurance and capital expenditures. We're starting to see the return to normal for many businesses as the number of vaccinations increase. Some restaurants are now more than 50% full during dinner hours. The patterns have changed, though. Used to be the case that Friday lunch hour was the busiest. Now it's Monday and Tuesday lunch hours that are the busiest. Go figure. These much-needed rescue lines are going to determine whether those arts and restaurant venue locations are going to be viable post-pandemic. We're at the cusp of a point where many of these folks are going to be exiting the business simply because they're too tired to restart after such a long time out of the business. It could be an opportunity for you to acquire some distressed assets at very good prices. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.